Hi, my name's Lydia, and over the last year I've been working on a project looking at the social dynamics of my mum's hometown in Congleton. As a small industrial textile town with strong working class roots, the industry gave way to the development of a close-knit community. By reimagining the industry through the voices of the women who had spent their lives in the mills and a series of reenacting processes, including making crepe paper flowers and shirts, I've begun to understand the relationships that formed within the industry and in the wider community, blurring the lines between friends, colleagues and neighbours, and in my mum's case, carer. My mum's childhood was heavily influenced by the friendship that developed between her mum, my Nana Bradley, and her best friend, my Nana Boone. Our story and my journey is shared in a short documentary and accompanying publication that navigates the timeline of events surrounding my mum's upbringing. Now, the lasting legacy of both my grandmother and my Nana Boone's friendship has led an insight into reimagining the community togetherness of Congleton itself, but also other post-industrial communities. Voiced by myself, my mum and my Nana Boone, the documentary entitled Mrs. Mum aims to offer an insight into the care and compassion provided by my grandmother's dearest friend.
That's good. And well, they grew up together,
Yeah.
your mum and Joanne did. And but this particular day, I don't know why, but your Nana Bradley appeared at the back door. I said, look, she's taking no harm. They're playing together. They're not doing, and they were doing me no harm. And oh, she said, all right. And off she went back to her sewing, you see. Of course, then Susan started this little knock on the window.
At the back door?
Oh, yes, she only come to the back door.
This is my mum, Susan. And this is her mum, Joan Bradley, and my Nana Bradley. And this is a lady she called Mrs. Mum, my Nana Boone, my Nana Bradley's best friend. This may sound a little confusing, but my mum was brought up with two mums, both of these ladies. Let me explain. My Nana Bradley and my Nana Boone both lived in Lambert's Lane with their young families. Having known each other from their early days working in the town's textile industry, they were good friends. Their children spent hours playing together, a lot of the time under the watchful eye of my Nana Boone. When my mum was 6, her mum had a life-changing operation that left her in a coma for 6 weeks and recovering in hospital for over a year. When she finally returned home, her great friend and neighbour, my Nana Boone, began caring for her and my mum.
When I was still at school, my mother worked at the shirt mill at Biddulph and your nan worked there as well, but she was younger than my mum. And she said to me one day, and she said something about my mum, and she said, she taught me how to sew. And was a very thriving town, Congleton, because there wasn't anything that you couldn't get in Congleton. Yeah. Everybody, when anybody was expecting a baby, they all went for their nappies. They all had the towels from down there. That was down towards Buglorton somewhere. No, things were very, very different. But
Congleton as a town, it's got its own traditions, simpler, slower traditions. But it's a different pace of life. Shops in Congleton still close on a Wednesday at lunchtime. And in Congleton, you've got quite a good rail network to Manchester and Stockport and Stoke from Congleton Station, so you could get to everywhere quite easily.
After spending the last 30 years living outside of Congleton, my mum finally made the move back to her roots 2 years ago after selling our family home. Her draw towards Congleton is something that I've never quite understood, and our recent conversations about her childhood have made me question whether living in a small industrial textile town like Congleton could have influenced the dynamics that her and my nana's relationship took on.
So I was 1, so Linda was 13 and Jean was 9 when we moved on to Lambert's Lane. They paid £2,000 for the house. They'd worked hard to save money to buy their own home instead of being in a council property. If I would say now, as an adult looking back, I had a very privileged childhood, very, very, very privileged, because my parents knew the value of every minute of every day for all the time. So there was never, ever any sadness or upset or tears. It was like, wow, today is another day.
Well, my Nana Bradley was poorly when she got married. When your mum was about 6, she'd had a few of these, and they'd suggested this heart valve, They went to Manchester because she had it done at Manchester. She didn't have a lot of quality to her life after she'd had it done, because the operation didn't go not exactly how it ought to have done. So you see, your mum grew up with a poorly mum.
What I knew had sparked my Nana Boone and Nana Bradley's friendship and was exceptionally unique about Congleton was its textile industry, a history of which dates right back to the 18th century, and its infrastructure is still present in the town today. The industry provided employment and economic stability for the town, particularly for women who provided a high majority of the workforce as skilled machinists. The opportunity to earn a wage and gain a respected role within the workplace undoubtedly elevated the respect demanded of women out in the community. This not only increased the socio-economic positions of those employed, but future prospects of education, occupation, and a higher income across the whole community, for men and women. This therefore increased the affluence of the town and enabled a prosperous and rich social culture to form. The industry connected workers to their neighbours, forming relationships that thrived beyond the mills and fed into the deep-rooted working-class community.
So your Nana Boone was close friends with my mum because of the children right from the beginning, and that friendship, they became like family, very, very close. In fact, we wouldn't have managed without her. She was almost like a social worker to our family, because she came up twice a day to take a pulse. A lot of the time she'd do our washing. I would say that we had an absolutely idyllic childhood. We had nothing materialistic at all, absolutely nothing, because anything I had been my sister's, or my dad had taken something apart to rebuild it. But I had freedom, complete freedom to come and go as and when. I mean, there were rules, because obviously it had to be in by 7 o'clock every night. But as children, even as young as 3 and 4, we always played outside in the lane.
The flourishing of Congleton's community is evidently clear in the balance struck between work and play. Among many social events in the town's calendar, the biggest of them all had to be the renowned town carnival that took place once every 2 years. With much anticipation and planning, the whole town would come alive to embrace a weekend-long celebration of parades and entertainment. Floats covered in small crepe paper flowers that had been months in the making accompanied baton twirlers and brass bands. The town's industries played a vital role in organising and funding the events, which in many ways acted as a means of giving back to the community and thanking the town for their efforts. The intricacy and unique nature of these small town traditions united the town as a class of people who shared and embraced one another as more than just colleagues, but close and valued acquaintances. A feeling I can't help but relate back to my Nana's selfless actions.
Well, we came home, that was 4:30 again in the morning, and really we shouldn't have come home. We should have stayed where we were, because she died at 8 o'clock next morning. I was with her when she died. And it was very upsetting, that was, because she had been poorly for such a long time. Told you, my life has revolved around children and old people, because I looked after your nan. I looked after Nan Poynter. I looked after my own old ones. That is the story of my life. I've always somebody else, and same as I say, I never ever had my own children, only my own children. And when we went away, we took your mum with us. Well, your mum wouldn't have had a very brilliant life if you know. Through no fault of her own. Well, not through anybody's fault, really.
Do you see Nana as the mother figure?
Oh yeah.
Or is it something different?
No, she's always been, but it's not something that happened after my mum died. She was always like a second mum. That's why I called her Mrs. Mum from being little. So it was nothing that was hidden away from my mum and dad or anything like that. Because she was such a close friend to my mum, we were all close family anyway, all of us.
The culmination of access to stable and affordable housing, high employment and quality education meant that my mum found herself surrounded by a host of perfectly aligned conditions that enabled and supported the compassion surrounding her upbringing. Without which, I'm sure my Nana wouldn't have had the means, despite her willing, to step in to carry some of the burden that afforded my mum the experience of a childhood in a way that her mother's illness never would have allowed otherwise. This poses the question of whether the loss of traditional industries and small working class cultures has also caused a decline in informal community care and welfare as we once knew it. Can my reflection on the qualities at play in the shared experience of my mum and Nana help to navigate a resurgence in the community togetherness born of our neighbours also being our colleagues, friends and carers? A question that has never been more profound given the times we find ourselves in, relying on those physically closest to us throughout the pandemic.
I just feel as if it's my hometown. It's my home. It's who I am. In a sentence, it's absolutely who I am. And the essence of that hasn't changed, which is what I find amazing, really, because we've moved back to Congleton, I've talked to other people who, like for example, walking up the Cloud on a Friday, it's almost like it's a town that stood still. And those traditions and those beliefs and that respect is still there.